Bonjour tout le monde. Earlier today, we received the job report for April. These numbers tell us what we already knew, that right now, Canadians are hurting because of this pandemic. Everyone has their own story, but it all boils down to a very difficult time for a lot of people. Canadians aren't alone in this, as the world faces COVID-19. But if you're out of work, you don't need to hear that other people are out of work too. You need to know that there's a plan to get you through this and get you back on the job. And that's exactly what this government is focused on. Aujourd'hui, on a reçu le rapport sur l'emploi pour le mois d'avril et les chiffres confirment ce qu'on sait depuis un bon moment. Vous êtes nombreux à souffrir à cause de cette pandémie. Et ce qui compte le plus pour vous, c'est de savoir qu'il y a un plan pour vous aider à passer à travers et retourner au travail le plus rapidement possible. Et c'est là-dessus que notre gouvernement se concentre. In the face of this unprecedented challenge, we've taken action. Maybe you're one of the more than 7 million people getting the CERB to help make ends meet. Or better yet, maybe thanks to the wage subsidy, your employer has been able to rehire you. That's what happened for people who work at Pursuit, a Banff tourism company. They're back on the job because of this program. We created the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to protect jobs wherever possible. Since it launched last week, employers have applied for subsidies for almost 2 million workers. And as provinces and territories start to gradually reopen over the coming months, and the CERB becomes less and less needed, this subsidy will play an even greater role. That's why I can announce today that we will be extending the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy beyond June to help kickstart our economic reopening and boost jobs. We'll have more details next week. But to businesses hit by COVID-19, know this. The wage subsidy will continue to be there for you to help you keep your employees on the payroll. So fill out the application at canada.ca if you haven't already done so. And if you had to let people go, try to bring them back. It's those workers who will drive our economy's short and long-term recovery. On other support, the Canada Emergency Business Account has been accessed by well over 500,000 businesses to give them much-needed loans. Between the CEBA and the wage subsidy, we're helping employers across the country keep Canadians on the job. Now, even though we're reaching millions of Canadians, we need to reach even more. We're working around the clock to update and adjust so that help gets to as many workers, small businesses, families, and young people as possible. We also know that some sectors have been hit especially hard, so we're stepping up on that too. Minister Bains will be leading a new Industry Strategy Council. Chaired by Monique Leroux, this council will take a deeper dive into how the pandemic is affecting specific sectors and how to best support them. We're leveraging expertise from the economic strategy tables we set up in the first mandate, as well as looking to new industry leaders. This will be a dedicated forum for industry and government to come together on tackling the effects of COVID-19. And it builds on what we've already done for workers in everything from energy to agriculture. On that note, Minister Guilbeault will have more details at noon about how our $500 million package for arts, culture, and amateur sport is now being rolled out to support workers in those sectors. This investment will help people access wage support and help organizations access funding. Our artists, creators, and young athletes inspire us and help us feel connected even when we're at home. They're there for us. And we're going to be there for them. No matter where you work, no matter who you are, these are tough times. But with the right plan, we will get through this and we'll come back stronger than ever. Le Canada fait face à un défi sans précédent. Donc, on a pris des mesures sans précédent. Vous êtes peut-être parmi les plus de 7 millions de personnes qui reçoivent la prestation canadienne d'urgence. Ou peut-être que vous avez été réembauché grâce à la subvention salariale d'urgence. Nous avons créé cette subvention pour protéger les emplois autant que possible. Depuis le lancement du programme la semaine dernière, les employeurs ont déjà déposé des demandes de subvention pour presque 2 millions de travailleurs. Et aujourd'hui, j'annonce qu'on va prolonger la subvention salariale d'urgence après le mois de juin pour encourager la relance de l'économie et stimuler la création d'emplois. On aura plus de détails à ce sujet la semaine prochaine, mais les entreprises touchées par la COVID-19 doivent savoir ceci. La subvention salariale va être là pour vous et vos travailleurs. Je vous invite à faire une demande sur le site de canada.ca si ce n'est pas déjà fait. Et si vous avez dû faire des mises à pied, essayez de réembaucher vos employés si possible. Ce sont ces travailleurs qui vont nous aider à relancer l'économie à court et à long terme. Les Canadiens veulent travailler, donc on va les aider à retourner au travail. Grâce à cette subvention et à d'autres mesures comme le compte d'urgence pour les entreprises, on aide les employeurs à garder leurs employés. Aujourd'hui, on a aussi des nouvelles pour le secteur de la culture. Le ministre Guilbeault va donner plus de détails là-dessus, mais en gros, on est en train de soutenir les artistes, les entreprises culturelles, les musiciens, les jeunes athlètes et leurs entraîneurs. Pour mieux comprendre les conséquences de la pandémie sur les différents secteurs de l'économie, on met sur pied le Conseil sur la stratégie industrielle, qui sera dirigé par le ministre Baines. Présidé par Monique Leroux, le Conseil aura pour mission d'étudier plus en profondeur les effets de la pandémie dans des secteurs spécifiques et surtout ce qu'on peut faire pour soutenir les travailleurs. On profite du savoir-faire des tables de stratégie économique qu'on avait mises sur pied durant notre premier mandat et on fait appel à des nouveaux leaders d'industrie. On traverse une période difficile en ce moment, mais avec le bon plan, on va revenir plus fort que jamais. It's hard to think of tougher times for our country, but as our elders remind us, Canada has faced challenges before, and we've always overcome them. Today, we mark the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day and the end of the Second World War on the continent. After 6 years of war, it must have felt like that day would never come, but it did. And it came because of the courage of all who served and because of the sacrifice of all who gave their lives. It has been 75 years since our grandparents and great-grandparents stood up to do their part. 75 years since they stood united and strong to ensure that we would live in peace and freedom. Today, as our generation faces our own battle, let us be inspired by them and their valor as we protect them and all Canadians. This is our challenge, and I know we will rise to meet it. Merci.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. The first question is from Jamie Tashagumscum from APTN. Line open.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. As we all know, Indigenous communities in the North are vulnerable due to social conditions like lack of housing and lack of medical facilities. And it's been said that Indigenous communities are 2 weeks behind the curve. Now, with provinces relaxing restrictions, some of these communities might see that as a threat. Do you agree with that opinion? And secondly, what would your advice be to those communities?
From the very beginning of this pandemic, we have seen that and known that Indigenous communities, particularly northern and remote ones, are particularly vulnerable to the spread of COVID-19, given existing challenges around medical facilities, things like overcrowding and other socioeconomic realities. That's why from the beginning we have made specific investments to support Indigenous communities as the country grapples with this pandemic. Right across the country, as certain regions are reopening, there is a recognition that other regions are going to need continued adjustments and continued protections, and we will ensure that we continue to work all together on protecting Indigenous communities who are indeed more vulnerable, even as other parts of the economy are looking at opening up.
Follow-up, Jamie?
Yeah, okay, so they've been doing pretty well so far, but like I said, they're 2 weeks behind the curve. So with provinces opening up, what would you suggest that they do?
I think we need to make sure we're keeping extremely vigilant and preventing outside cases from entering those communities. We've seen, for example, Nunavut be very successful, not just remaining 2 weeks behind the curve, but months behind the curve as they continue to have no cases because of very strong travel restrictions that were brought in immediately and have served to keep the vulnerable and remote communities in our far north completely COVID-free. But right across the country, various communities will take appropriate measures, and we will be there as a government and other orders of government as well to support them in doing the things that need to be done to keep elders and all in those communities safe.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Michel Lamarche, TVA Nouvelle. À vous.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. J'aimerais savoir, devant le fait que vous considérez prolonger la subvention salariale, est-ce que vous pensez faire la même chose avec la prestation canadienne d'urgence?
La prestation canadienne d'urgence déjà continue pour plus longtemps que la subvention salariale. Et nous reconnaissons aussi que au fur et à mesure que dans les semaines et les mois à venir, l'économie commence à reprendre un peu de souffle, moins de gens vont avoir besoin de la prestation d'urgence parce qu'ils vont retourner vers le travail et probablement que plus de gens vont choisir de prendre la subvention salariale. C'est pour ça qu'on annonce aujourd'hui qu'on va prolonger l'impact et l'utilisation de la subvention salariale. Nous allons continuer de s'ajuster au fur et à mesure que la situation évolue. Depuis le début de cette situation, on a été là pour ajuster le tir et pour améliorer notre approche pour pouvoir aider le plus de gens possible, étant donné les situations du moment. From the beginning, we recognized that we needed to constantly adjust and improve the delivery of these unprecedented mechanisms to support Canadians who are suffering through this particular crisis. That's why we recognize that there are many different things we need to do as the economy starts to reopen. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit had always been planned to last longer or had a timeline that was already longer than the wage subsidy. But we recognize that as the economy starts to reopen, people will be getting back to work, leaving the emergency response benefit and perhaps going on to the wage subsidy as employers bring people back on and get them back to work as our economy picks up over the coming weeks and months. That's why we will constantly be adjusting to make sure that Canadians are getting the support they need as we look to carefully and gradually restarting our economy.
Une suivi, Michel?
Bien sûr, j'aimerais justement savoir, cette subvention salariale, combien de temps, à votre avis, il faudra la prolonger? Et est-ce que devant la réouverture de l'économie, il y a des craintes de votre part? Sentez-vous qu'on pourrait rater cette relance parce qu'on déconfine trop rapidement au moment où on se parle?
Depuis le début, on a souligné à quel point c'est important de relancer de façon graduelle et d'être extrêmement vigilant, de pouvoir surveiller comment la COVID se répand. C'est pourquoi on est en train d'investir massivement en tests de dépistage, mais aussi pourquoi nous nous devons d'assurer que les mécanismes sont en place à travers le pays au fur et à mesure qu'on relance l'économie. La subvention salariale va être étendue au-delà du mois de juin. On aura plus de détails à annoncer la semaine prochaine là-dessus, mais je veux déjà dire aux entreprises qui sont en train de regarder comment ils vont pouvoir s'approcher de la relance qu'ils peuvent savoir que la subvention salariale va être en place pendant un bon moment encore et donc ils devraient commencer à réembaucher leurs travailleurs pour pouvoir créer ce lien entre travailleurs et emploi pour bien pouvoir relancer rapidement l'économie.
Merci. Prochaine question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Mike Blanchfield, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. Two successive job reports are showing that women in service roles have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. In light of that, what specific measures do you think are needed to strengthen Canada's economic recovery?
This is one of the first recessions we've ever seen that has so hard hit vulnerable workers in the service sector, particularly women and new Canadians and young people. And that was evident in the March numbers and continues to be the case in the April numbers. What we're seeing, even beyond these reports and these numbers, is the reality on the ground that people who are already vulnerable in the workforce, people who are already disadvantaged or facing extra barriers are always the first to get hit when we have a difficult situation like this. That's why as a society, not only do we need to do what we are doing in the short term to give extra supports to vulnerable people, but we need to make sure that as we move forward to rebuilding and creating a more prosperous Canada in the coming months and years, we think very, very carefully about how important the work is that is being done by women and vulnerable Canadians and how we need to make sure we're better supporting them, not just for potential future crises, but for business as usual as our country comes back to normal. Cette crise a frappé très fort sur les femmes, sur les gens vulnérables comme des nouveaux Canadiens ou des jeunes. Leurs emplois ont été parmi les premiers à disparaître. Et donc, c'est pour ça que nous avons mis en place des mesures spécifiques pour aider ces gens vulnérables particulièrement. Mais au-delà de cette crise, nous devons réfléchir à comment, quand on rebâtit l'économie, on va s'assurer que les gens les plus vulnérables soient moins vulnérables dans une économie qui a repris. Comment on va s'assurer que dans les années à venir, on s'occupe de tous et de toutes dans ce pays pour avoir un pays plus juste et équitable.
Follow-up, Mike?
Yes, Prime Minister. Well, given that reality on the ground that you're talking about and that these vulnerable people are, as you say, the first to get hit, how will you ensure that government stimulus money helps those people first and does not go instead to the bottom line of big corporations?
Well, we are not yet talking about stimulus. We are still very much in the support and emergency phase right now. And that's why from the beginning, the measures we put forward have been entirely focused on Canadians. With the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, that's over 7 million people across this country who have benefited from that. With the wage subsidy that goes to workers. Employers don't keep a penny of that. They pass it through to their workers so that workers have that continued link with their job and get a paycheck that will ensure that as the economy reopens, they will be able to come back to work quickly and smoothly. Our focus every step of the way, even on supporting small businesses, has been ensuring that people are able to keep jobs going for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We will, over the coming days, start looking at specific sectoral supports for various industries that have been hit particularly hard by COVID-19. But even then, our focus will be on the workers, on the supply chains that involve many, many small businesses across this country for many of these industries, and not on the corporate well-being of an industry or of a sector, but indeed staying focused on helping Canadians, because it is Canadians who are at the heart of our economic success, at the heart of our success as a country, and as a government, we will always stay focused on them.
Thank you. We'll take one more question on the phone. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Vastel, Le Devoir, à vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Trudeau. J'aimerais revenir sur la prestation canadienne d'urgence. On voit que les écoles, les garderies commencent à reprendre petit à petit, mais il y a une grosse interrogation à savoir si les enseignants ou les monitrices de garderie qui se sentent pas en sécurité de reprendre le travail pourront refuser de retourner au bureau et se prévaloir de la PCU. Au Québec, par contre, le gouvernement juge que c'est un environnement de travail sécuritaire. Donc, j'aimerais savoir, est-ce qu'une perception personnelle que notre endroit de travail n'est pas sécuritaire serait suffisante pour refuser d'aller travailler et toucher la PCU?
D'abord, en aucun cas, en moment de crise ou en moment normal, aucun Canadien ne devrait travailler en situation d'inquiétude pour leur santé et de leur sécurité. On a des normes très précises et très importantes au pays pour s'assurer que, en temps normal, les travailleurs font leur travail en toute sécurité. Pendant cette pandémie, ces inquiétudes sont encore plus élevées et donc c'est pour ça que dans les principes que nous avions mis de l'avant avec les provinces et territoires, cet élément de sécurité au travail est primordial pour toute relance économique. Et on s'attend à ce que les conditions de travail dans lesquelles les gens vont se retrouver, même dans des secteurs de travail essentiels, vont être assez sécuritaires pour que les gens se sentent en confiance pour pouvoir retourner au travail. Okay. I think one of the things that is fundamental in Canada is that no one, whether in crisis times or in regular times, should be working in a job in conditions that are unsafe or put them at risk. That is a fundamental principle of Canada that we will always ensure to uphold. In this particular situation, there are heightened concerns about health for a large number of people, for everyone, but particularly and even in essential work sectors. We need to make sure that we are putting in place all the necessary measures so that people can feel confident about their own safety, about having minimized the risks as they get back to work. That's why we put that as one of the fundamental principles that needs to be in place before any sector talks about reopening the economy. That was part of the principles agreed to by the provinces and the federal government on relaunching our economy.
Suivi, Mary?
Merci. Mais cela dit, vous parlez des conditions qui doivent être respectées, que ce lieu de travail-là soit sécuritaire, mais qui détermine si le lieu de travail est sécuritaire ou pas? Je vous repose ma question. Est-ce qu'une personne peut elle-même déterminer dans sa perception personnelle qu'elle ne se sent pas en sécurité d'aller travailler dans une garderie? Ou est-ce que le gouvernement va décider de la légitimité d'une demande de PCU?
Je pense que, comme toute situation, ça va se jouer selon les différents cas. Le gouvernement va certainement avoir des choses à dire par rapport aux besoins de différents secteurs ou différentes industries. Mais on sait aussi que dans certains cas, si c'est le cas d'une personne qui s'occupe d'un aîné chez eux et qui sont particulièrement vulnérables ou qui ont une condition médicale préexistante, les les niveaux de protection dont ils auraient besoin peuvent varier. Et je pense qu'on va tous devoir travailler de façon extrêmement attentive et raisonnable pour assurer que les mesures sont en place pour protéger les gens.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Mathieu Goyer de Radio-Canada. Il y aura éventuellement une relance de l'économie canadienne. Est-ce que dans cette relance, il y aura des secteurs de l'économie que vous allez privilégier? Est-ce que la pandémie ne doit pas servir également de levier pour transformer l'économie canadienne?
Je pense que la priorité, c'est de reprendre l'activité économique pour les Canadiens, pour les travailleurs, dans bien des secteurs et à travers l'économie. Mais en même temps, c'est sûr qu'on va devoir avoir des réflexions sur comment cette relance peut être faite de façon sécuritaire, compte tenu de la réalité continue de la COVID-19. Mais il y a aussi d'autres réflexions. Je pense qu'on a tous appris qu'il y a et des défis et des avantages du travail à la maison, du télétravail, par exemple. Et là, il y aura un besoin d'investir plus dans le numérique et de faire un virage encore plus rapide que ce qui se faisait avant. On va vouloir certainement continuer la lutte contre les changements climatiques et je pense qu'une relance va nous donner une occasion d'en faire plus dans bien des secteurs. Je pense que c'est important de réfléchir à de quoi pourrait avoir l'air le Canada dans 1 an, dans 2 ans, dans 10 ans et de travailler vers ça. Mais en même temps, ce qu'on veut, c'est de pouvoir recommencer à créer de la prospérité pour tous les Canadiens.
On l'a vu dans les chiffres ce matin, les jeunes sont particulièrement touchés par les pertes d'emploi. Comptez-vous prolonger l'aide d'urgence pour les étudiants également?
On a déjà planifié que l'aide d'urgence aux étudiants allait être là jusqu'au mois d'août. Les étudiants, typiquement, quand ils finissent leur année collégiale universitaire, prennent un emploi pour l'été pour aider à payer leurs besoins, subvenir à leurs besoins pour l'année scolaire. Donc, l'aide aux étudiants est là pour remplacer tous ces milliers d'emplois qui ne seront pas là pour les jeunes cet été. On sait quand même que les jeunes veulent travailler et vont chercher dans les emplois que le gouvernement est en train de créer et avec le programme d'emploi été et avec des nouveaux programmes pour aider dans des secteurs particulièrement vulnérables ou affectés par la COVID-19. Mais on a des mesures en place pour aider les jeunes à s'étirer jusqu'au mois de septembre et la reprise de l'école.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry with CBC. I'd like to ask you about the jobs numbers again. You were talking about just how some groups are getting hit disproportionately hard, thinking young people, thinking women. What specifically can the government do as the recovery begins to make sure that these groups aren't permanently set back?
I think the idea of permanent challenges is particularly poignant for young people, where we know that a summer without work experience, a summer where they are struggling to pay their groceries or their rent, is a significant setback in their march towards economic independence and successful outcomes after their schooling. That's why we put in place the Canada Emergency Student Benefit to help them this summer, make sure that there aren't long-term impacts. On women particularly that we've seen have been extremely impacted by this economic challenge as well as a health challenge. We have moved forward on supports for them, particularly more emergency supports for women who are facing challenges of domestic violence. But at the same time, we know we have to do more. The importance of childcare has been yet again emphasized, that as we move towards an economic restarting, there needs to be more and secure childcare spaces for people to get back into the workforce. These are the kinds of things that we're going to have to think about, both in the immediate but also for the longer term, to make sure that equality in this country is more than just a goal, but is a concrete reality. Okay. Je pense qu'il y a bien des choses qui nous préoccupent par rapport aux années à venir. Et effectivement, des groupes comme les jeunes et les femmes pourraient se voir avec des échos négatifs de cette crise pendant bien des années, plus que d'autres. Par rapport aux jeunes, c'est pour ça qu'on a mis en place la prestation canadienne d'urgence pour les étudiants qui va les soutenir pour cet été jusqu'à la fin du mois d'août pour qu'ils puissent continuer leurs études sans avoir trop de remous, d'impact par la crise, tout en créant plus d'opportunités de travail pour que plusieurs d'entre eux puissent quand même avoir l'expérience nécessaire qui va leur être très utile dans les années à venir. Par rapport aux femmes, on sait qu'il y a toujours plus à faire pour arriver à une société plus équitable. On sait par exemple que plus d'aide pour les centres et les refuges pour victimes de violences domestiques est extrêmement importante et c'est ce qu'on a fait, mais il y a plus à faire. On sait aussi que l'accès aux garderies, aux centres de petites enfances vont être extrêmement importantes pour la relance et pour les familles et particulièrement les femmes. C'est pour ça qu'on est en train de regarder ce qu'on peut faire là-dedans.
And I'd like to ask you about transit. In Toronto, the TTC is going to be making some historic cuts to its service because of the pandemic. Transit groups have been calling on the federal government to provide emergency funding, keep buses, trains rolling, get emergency or essential workers to their jobs. Is that something that the government could look at?
This government has made historic investments in transit over the past years. We recognize that public transit is an essential part of growing the economy, of helping our cities, and mostly helping people be able to get to work from home in a reliable way. That's why we believe so deeply in transit. Operation of transit is more of a municipal and provincial responsibility, and we hope to see the provinces stepping up on supporting this essential element of the economic relaunch. People are going to need to be able to get to and from work as we want to get the economy going again. But the federal government is always looking to be a partner in helping out in terms of economic relaunch wherever we can.
Prime Minister Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. Last week you were saying that help is coming for seniors. They have been asking for the last few weeks where the help for them is. You're talking about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which gives $2,000 to the people who you say need it most. But seniors are still vulnerable and they still need to pay their rent and their groceries, and they're saying that the government programs that they receive still don't add up to $2,000. So why do some people deserve $2,000 from the government and other people don't?
First of all, we have worked very, very hard to help all Canadians with replacement of income that has been lost during this. We knew that workers who were expecting to get a paycheck to be able to pay for their groceries, to be able to pay for their rent, and suddenly because of COVID-19 lost their job, and there were millions of them, as we saw in the recent job numbers today. Needed to get that income replacement. And we did that with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Seniors, many of whom are on fixed incomes, did not see that disappearance of their income at the same time, although some did, and many qualify for the CERB, even as seniors, and therefore are getting the support. At the same time, however, we recognize that there are additional costs and additional vulnerabilities that seniors have been facing, and that's why we have made investments, whether it's through increasing the GST supplement that hits many, many vulnerable seniors, whether it's through new programs that are supporting seniors in vulnerable situations. And like I said, we'll have more to say very soon on how we continue to support the seniors who built us this extraordinary country and to whom we owe so much thanks. Notre priorité dès le début a été de remplacer le revenu de ceux qui avaient tout à coup perdu leur job à cause de la COVID-19. C'était des gens qui s'attendaient à des chèques de paye pour pouvoir payer leur épicerie, payer leur loyer. Et nous avions avancé avec des mesures rapidement avec la prestation pour les aider. Et on voit plus de 7 millions de Canadiens qui reçoivent cette prestation de façon urgente et essentielle. En même temps, il y a d'autres groupes comme les aînés, où il y en a plusieurs qui qualifient aussi pour cette prestation d'urgence parce qu'ils avaient un revenu de travail, qui, même s'ils n'ont pas perdu de leur pension ou de leur revenu fixe, voient plus de coûts ou plus de défis à cause de la COVID-19. C'est pour ça qu'on a pris des mesures qui ont eu un impact sur eux, que ce soit l'augmentation du retour de la TPS qui a aidé énormément d'aînés, que ce soit des programmes spécifiques qui les appuient. On est là pour eux. Et comme j'ai dit, nous allons continuer d'être là pour eux. On va avoir des annonces dans les jours à venir sur comment on va aider particulièrement nos aînés les plus vulnérables qui passent des moments difficiles et au niveau de la santé et au niveau de l'économie.
And Prime Minister, a few minutes ago in response to a colleague's question, you said that people don't have to go back to work if they don't feel safe there. Yesterday, workers outside of the Cargill meat plant, which is the largest outbreak in Canada, are saying that they don't feel safe going to work, even though their employers are saying that they've put measures in place. Should these workers be staying home, and what do you say to them if they're not feeling safe?
I'm not going to weigh in on specific cases in provincial jurisdiction, but I will say that it is a well-established principle in Canada and a hallmark of our values as a country that no one should be asked to work in unsafe conditions. That applies during a pandemic as well. We have put in many measures across various industries to minimize the risk, particularly around essential work. But we're going to have to be very careful to ensure that we're doing what we need to do right across the country, businesses, orders of governments, and all Canadians, to ensure the safety of the people who are working to provide for the rest of us.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Brian Mullen, Global News. Taiwan has donated 500,000 surgical masks needed by Canadian healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic. Your foreign minister wouldn't thank the country by name. Will you?
I'm happy to thank Taiwan for its generous donation. It is important at this point that Canadians and all people around the world pull together to be there for each other, because this is a global challenge that is going to face a global response. We need to do this together, and we will.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. The former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, says China is a bully and that the way for Canada to deal with China is to stand up for it instead of backing down. Is your government standing up to China, or is it backing away from China?
My responsibility as Prime Minister is to make sure that we're providing for Canadians and keeping Canadians safe. That's the job people expect me to do, and that is exactly what I'm doing. We're going to ensure that Canadians have the equipment, the supplies, the support they need to make it through this pandemic. And of course, at the same time, we will be asking difficult questions about how we're making it through this pandemic, how this came to happen, how we can learn from this. There'll be plenty of time for questions in the months to come. My focus, rightly, is on doing everything I can to help Canadians through this.
So are you standing up for China?
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.